In early 2004, something very strange was discovered in many computers all around the world, predominantly those running Windows XP, the most popular operating system at the time. It would not only become the subject of many online conspiracies, given the world's climate at the time, but it would also completely change our understanding of digital expression and communication. And it all started with just a blank Notepad file. All you had to do was just type in the sentence, "Bush hid the facts," and save it as any other regular text file, and then close it. But once you opened it back up, it was gone, leaving you with just a corrupt, garbled up mess. It isn't just this sentence either. Other phrases like "Bush did the crime," "They hid new votes," and "Bush had the files" all return with the same corrupted result. Everything you typed, now gone. It sounds crazy, but this is indeed a real thing. If you have a Windows XP computer laying around somewhere, open up Notepad and try this out for yourself. While a very oddly specific thing for someone to find, this naturally got many people online scared. What on earth is going on here? Why does typing in these sentences that seemingly criticize the Bush administration or even the government as a whole generate such ominous and cryptic results? Are they trying to censor us? Do Microsoft and the government know something that we don't?
But first, I want to tell you a little scary story. With the internet being all around us in a form that we can't hear, see, or touch, there's no way of truly knowing where anybody is. Which brings me to the old legend of the cyber ghost. So it's okay. I'm gonna get through this. Okay. There are eyes on you at all times. You're being watched. ISPs, school institutions, the evil eye. They can see what you're doing. And the cyber ghost consists of over 38 million users worldwide and over 20,000 excellent reviews according to Trustpilot.com that can hide their identities and location through a virtual private network. They can select one of over 100 locations and reroute all their traffic through it, obscuring where they are and encrypting everything they do online. Whew. There's just no way of knowing. So it looks like they're right here, but they're actually right here. It was just the aircon. It's hot here. Cyber ghosts can use this power to access geo-restricted content like video games, Netflix, Amazon, or even secure better online deals that are location dependent. The most telling part? Anyone can become a cyber ghost. Oh my god, I think I'm becoming one right now. Oh, never mind. You have to sign up first. That was just me. By visiting the link on the screen, you can sign up for CyberGhost VPN at just $2 a month, plus 4 months completely free. There's even a 45-day money-back guarantee. CyberGhost VPN. Sounds like the thrill of a lifetime, if you ask me.
When you think about just the time and place this whole thing was discovered in the United States during the height of an extremely controversial military conflict, this is very creepy. It's just too specific, especially with a variety of similar sentences still being affected by it. Was this a deliberate attempt from Microsoft to keep us from knowing the truth? No? Yeah, I hate to burst everyone's conspiratorial bubble, but it is indeed just a coincidence. But I actually think that makes this whole thing all the more interesting. The fact that something as specific as this can create such a strange result once reopened. Not because of some centralized censorship, but simply because of math. In fact, this is a bug within Notepad that predates Windows XP and the Bush administration altogether. It first showed up in 1994 with the release of Windows NT 3.5. Heck, this will also happen if you type in "Nation Squid hid the facts." Well, maybe I did. Wouldn't you like to know? For those who aren't aware, Windows NT is the kernel that made up all business editions of Windows back in the 90s, with the home versions still running the DOS-based 9X kernel. This would be the standard that Microsoft followed until Windows XP in 2001, which would be the first Windows version to provide both home and business versions that were both under this NT kernel. Naturally, this would be based off Windows NT 3.5, so this bug would also be present in XP. Actually, all Windows NT systems post 1994 and prior to Vista have this bug, including its incremental updates and even Windows 2000. Windows 3.1, 95, 98, and Me were not affected. I noticed some articles online attributing this strange bug to the sentence's character count pattern. 4-character word, then 2 3-character words, all followed by a 5-character word, saying that any sentence with this structure will get the error. But that's not true. There are plenty of sentences of this kind that don't get affected at all. This is the pattern that is the easiest to remember, just because of the sentence that popularized it. So it definitely pops up the most when encountering it. However, as with this example, the character count is clearly larger, yet it's still affected. But why? What did Windows NT decide to do differently, in Notepad of all places? To answer that question, we need to go back to the very beginning. As you know, computers are machines that operate using patterns of ones and zeros. Each unique pattern of these ones and zeros represents a unique data set in a variety of contexts, depending on what the computer is programmed to do at that specific moment. This is what allows computers to perform very complex calculations and then show them to us in a way that we understand, such as text. However, in the 1960s, as mainframes were becoming more common post-World War II, this was starting to get a bit complicated. There was no strict standard for how this data should be expressed or even calculated. Each mainframe had its own method of interpreting these ones and zeros, which meant that an IBM mainframe may not be able to understand things like text from a General Electric mainframe. They work with the same data, but they basically spoke different languages. What if we could essentially create one main language that all the computers could use, particularly when it came to how text was expressed in binary? And so ASCII was created. Now programmers from all over the world could rely on a standard encoding system for representing text in the form of a unique 7-bit binary number. Yes, 7. The 8th bit was used for error checking. This meant that you could now have 128 possible arrangements of these numbers, and therefore the same number of possible characters and commands. Now, ASCII was obviously not the only encoding system that would start to appear at this time, but it was the most popular due to its minimal use of resources and simplicity, especially when working with multiple kinds of machines. But 128 characters is a bit small, enough for the English alphabet, numbers, punctuation, control commands, and so on. But with the majority of the computing world at the time being English-speaking, it was more than enough. So, it remained a comfortable standard for the next 25 years. But then computers got more powerful, and then more people from different backgrounds all over the world started using computers. 16-bit computers at that. Now it was easier and more practical to represent these characters in a binary system that went beyond just 7 or 8 bits. After years of research, their new standard was published in 1991. It was called Unicode. Compared to ASCII's original 128 characters, now you could have over 65,000. Unicode's structure would, of course, change significantly over the years, including the number of bits it used. But this was how it all started, and it took some time for Unicode to become commonplace. This meant that the likelihood was increasing of a computer with Unicode trying to communicate with another that didn't have it, which would cause problems. So in 1994, Microsoft released Windows NT 3.5, and with it came a brand new function called IsTextUnicode. This was a rather unique function that was pretty much specifically designed for fixing this ambiguity. Is this text I am looking at Unicode or not? How can I be so sure? For example, when most people type something into a Notepad file, they are just saving it and giving it a name. They aren't clicking this little button down here that allows you to choose which encoding standard you want. ANSI is the default. But as you can see, you can select other ones such as Unicode. If you check the file under the hood, you can see these little markers basically saying, hey, this is the encoding of the file, so read everything after it as that. These are known as byte order marks, or bombs. If you look at the metadata for an ANSI file, there is no marker here. That's because ANSI encompasses all kinds of encodings, and they are different things in different regions. For that reason, if you type in Bush hid the facts and specifically save it as Unicode, it will show up fine. But most people don't do that. Your 85-year-old grandmother on the computer probably doesn't even know what Unicode is. She's just going to type what she wants in Notepad and then save it, as she's been taught to do. And Microsoft knows this. They want the user experience to be as easy and straightforward as possible. They needed to figure out a way for people using a variety of encodings to easily save their file while having the computer still be able to figure out what encoding it is just based on what they typed. And that's what IsTextUnicode was designed to do. It brilliantly observed two key things in a document: how the bits were formatted, and weirdly, the ways that spoken human language forms certain Unicode byte distributions. Now, this is when things get very technical and complicated. It is very math heavy, so I will do my best to explain it. As we mentioned, Unicode and ANSI, ASCII, etc. all follow different formats for how these bits are represented. Each character in ANSI and ASCII encoding is 1 byte, which is typically expressed as a 2-digit hex value. For example, B is 42. In Unicode, specifically UTF-16, each character is 2 bytes that are expressed as two-digit hex values. The second pair of numbers is typically just 2 zeros, especially with the Latin alphabet. So B in Unicode would be 4200. Because pretty much all the letters in the English language and punctuation were often written with this notation, typically ending in 00, it is very easy for a computer to pick up on this pattern and immediately detect it as Unicode. However, when most people in the early 2000s were typing in Notepad and just clicking save without thinking about it, they were saving it as an ANSI file. So when the computer looked at the metadata of these files to translate it for the humans to read, they are seeing a bunch of hexadecimals without these pairs of zeros popping up everywhere. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the text isn't in Unicode. After all, some Unicode encodings do not display these zeros at all, and within the metadata, at a first glance, can look virtually identical to ANSI notation. But again, ANSI supports way less characters than Unicode does, so it is important for the computer to figure out which is which. So what do you do if these two look the same? Now that the IsTextUnicode function could not determine the text encoding based on these number patterns, it had to effectively guess what the encoding was based on the actual patterns that statistically appear the most in written languages. The average sentence in a given language typically uses a certain number of spaces, vowels, digraphs, etc. pretty consistently. This then creates a pretty measurable byte distribution when looking at the values of the characters being used. IsTextUnicode essentially quantified this pattern by exploiting this distribution and determining from it whether or not the text was most likely written in Unicode or something like ANSI. Again, at first glance, ANSI and Unicode could look very similar, so guessing incorrectly could mean your readable content becomes gibberish. By observing the pattern that is present, this function can significantly increase its chances of making the right decision. It does this by checking if the total changes to all the low bytes is higher than the total changes to all the high bytes times 3. If it is, then it is read as Unicode. Here's how it works. Let's say I type in the hippo was Paul into Notepad and save it, like any other file. This is what the text looks like within the metadata as these values. These are usually shown in hexadecimal, but the results are the same when done in just decimal. And because there are no letters in that notation, it is much easier to read, so I will be converting this to decimal for this demonstration. The function sees these numbers and then takes the first two values as they are. We will write them side by side to represent the low byte and the high byte. It then takes the third value and finds the difference between it and the first value. Also, this is the absolute value. So if we subtract a larger number from a smaller one and get a negative number, make it positive anyway. We then take the fourth value and subtract it from the second value, then the fifth value from the third, the sixth from the fourth, and so on. We do this until we get to the very end. Now that we have our two columns, we find the sum of each of them. We are left with 133 and 542. After the function has done all these calculations, it looks at these two numbers and performs the test. Is the number on the left lower than the number on the right times 3? If so, it is not Unicode. It then goes back and reads these original values in the ANSI style and spells out your text to read the way it is supposed to once you open up Notepad. And as it turns out, most sentences that you write follow this pattern. This is because in Unicode, the low byte value of a character is typically higher than the high byte value of that same character, as the high byte is typically 00. This times 3 rule provides a little wiggle room and margin of error in case the high byte value of a character is not 00. It is no silver bullet, it is really just a game of heuristics at the end of the day, but it remained unnoticed for nearly a decade, because it works almost every time. Until it doesn't. Let's see what happens when we put in our sentence, Bush hid the facts. We will convert this into decimal for simplicity, like before, and then we will go ahead and do the math, the first two values left as is, and then finding the difference of every other value. We then write our answer as absolute value and alternate between adding them to these two columns. Once again, we do this all the way down. Then we add up each of the columns and perform the test. And would you look at that? We have a strange scenario where a regular sentence deviates from this pattern. If we multiply 185 times 3, we get 555. So we have a high byte that's lower in value than the low byte. IsTextUnicode then decides, incorrectly, that this file is Unicode. It then starts taking these ANSI values into pairs as UTF-16 LE Unicode characters are displayed, and falsely guesses what characters they are. This pairing is also why this bug only works with strings of text that have an even number of characters, spaces included. No, these high bytes aren't 00, but they aren't always are. For example, Chinese characters. If you decide to pair these single byte ANSI numbers and treat them like paired up Unicode characters, you will get Chinese characters that happen to follow this pairing in UTF-16 LE, which is the Unicode that this function reverts to. It is a Chinese phrase that translates to the ancient tomb of the king of Mo. According to Google Translate, I'm pretty sure it's just gibberish. In fact, this is a phenomenon known as Moji, and it refers to this specific situation where the wrong encoding is used and misreads the data. But because most computers running Windows XP in the States did not have these Chinese characters installed on their computer, it just returned a bunch of boxes. And so, from a perfect storm of circumstances and seemingly divine coincidence, you are now at the heart of a grand conspiracy. Other sentences that don't follow this algorithm and end up encountering this same bug include Bush hid the farts, John ate the cakes, cats are the elite, and the cheeky this app can break. I actually created a spreadsheet where you can type in any sentence you desire, and it will determine if it triggers this bug. I have included it on my Patreon if you would like to test it out for yourself there. Now, my spreadsheet only accurately generates sentences with 18 characters. It got very complicated when I put this thing together. But still, it was a pretty cool little project. But it really isn't that hard to find sentences that cause this bug. Again, it doesn't have to strictly follow this word pattern or 18-character rule either, just as long as the end result has an even character count and doesn't satisfy this algorithm. I even learned while working on this video that if you put a tilde mark at the front of a lot of sentences, it will also cause this bug to occur. I think this is because the tilde has a pretty weird decimal value, and given that it's put in the first sequence of the column untouched, it gives the low byte a rather high lead in satisfying this Unicode rule. This allows you to get away with typing a lot and making the results much spookier at face value. But once again, it needs to follow this strict set of rules. Even just adding a punctuation mark or even a space at the end of the sentence will cause the file to be unaffected and open as it was intended. This bug was eventually patched with the release of Windows Vista, where better Unicode detection algorithms were put in place over the now archaic and primitive IsTextUnicode function. So I guess the main life lesson here is that even the tiniest oversight can completely change the meaning of what you are trying to say. So, it is best to be mindful when doing it. This was by far one of the most complicated videos I've had to research, so I hope I got all of this right. But based on all the things I read online, the demonstration videos I watched, and the huge number of tests I personally conducted myself, I am pretty confident I did. But if there is something that I missed or got wrong, please do let me know in the comments. That is how I improve. The YouTube channels Nostalgia Nerd and Flytech also did great demonstrations on this whole tale, so I highly suggest checking their videos out as well. You can check out other tales from the early internet right here, as well as my second channel, all about the history of the Beatles. A special thanks to my Patreon supporters. Go to patreon.com/nationsquid for ad-free videos and exclusive content, like that spreadsheet. A coffee is always appreciated too. Thank you for watching, everyone.